For a long time, I've loved playing with electronic music, and there is a very big part of that that's called GAS, Gear Acquisition Syndrome. It's a very real thing. So looking at this list is probably going to be pretty cathartic and, maybe give me some ideas for something else that might not break the bank. What hobby does not get more expensive the more you dive into it? Story 1. Oddly enough, lace making. Depending on the style of lace you're doing, the initial cost of tools can be fairly steep or super cheap. Some styles require a needle, just a needle. But once you've got the equipment, you're only ever required to buy thread and maybe pins or paper. Okay, pattern books, but if you're even a little bit creative, you've got that covered. Source. Used to make lace. Over the course of 15 years, I spent maybe $200. Not $200 a year. 200 spread over 15 years. And most of that was because I wanted specialty threads like hand-spun linen, etc. Initially read this as lance making, and I'm now in a wiki hole looking at medieval weaponry. I have nothing really to commit, just thought you should know one of the incredibly weird side effects of your reply. And if you let some historical reenactment groups know you actually enjoy making lace, you can make a fair bit of money off of it. Handmade, historically accurate lace is quite pricey, and 99.9% of that cost is in labor. The SCA is where I got started. Eventually left the SCA, but didn't leave laces until my health just wouldn't allow it anymore. I did once make an art and sciences judge scream in the midst of a competition, though. One of the upsides of laces is how strong it is compared to some of the others. I was talking to a friend about this, and to prove my point, picked up a 3x2 foot panel of lace, my work, twisted it up like I was going to towel snap somebody's butt, and then jerked on the ends as hard as I could. Judge screamed in horror, thinking I'd destroyed a year's worth of work. It didn't destroy it. I just unrolled it, smoothed it out, and laid it back onto the table. No fuss, no muss. It's one of my favorite stories. I did not know lace making was a thing, and now I'm very interested. The most expensive setup is probably bobbin lace. You need a specially made pillow, upwards of $150 on Amazon for a proper one, though I was taught on just a panel of styrofoam, a bunch of pins, and the bobbins, not counting pattern books. Laces, my style of choice, is much less. A shuttle, some doweling, and a weighted pillow. My first pillow was literally a piece of broken cinder block plus quilt batting wrapped in scrap cloth, and something to stretch the finished piece on. I used canvas stretching frames because they were modular, cheap, and reusable. There are half a dozen needle lace variants, most of which require only a needle and thread, or in a couple, a needle plus some sturdy paper to prick the pattern into. Irish lace requires a crochet hook, less than $5. Tatting like your grandma did can be done with a long needle or with a shuttle, again, less than $5. There are a few more variants, but these are enough to get you started. Personally, I went with Lasses because it was the oldest. Samples of what could be called Lasses have been found buried with mummies. $200 over 15 years? I know some hobbies that would require $200 before you even get started with them. That's pretty impressive. It kind of sounds like a hobby where once you know the pattern you have to follow, you can just sort of turn your mind off and have a sort of meditative effect. Plus, it sounds like you could have a side hustle and make a little bit of money, too. That's never bad. Story 2. Lockpicking. That actually makes more money, if you're fast enough. You can do it legally, you know. Lots of people lose their keys or never got keys to something they own. Funny story. One day, I had the most horrible, nerve-wracking workday. I just wanted to go home, make dinner, and chill with my significant other. She knew about my workday, so she didn't tell me about how we had a power outage, hoping she could fix it before I got home. She couldn't, and all the apartments around had power. I figured a fuse must have switched off or gone bust. There was a box with fuses in the hallway, and it had a padlock. I tried to call the super, then the electricity company, then any neighbor I could find, and no one had a key. I tried to cut a can of Coke in a way that could shimmy it to no avail. I was as ticked as I was desperate. All our devices were running out of juice by 10 p.m. So I called a locksmith. The dude came within 20 minutes, opened the padlock within 40 seconds, and left. That was quite expensive. I turned on the fuse switch, went back inside, opened a beer, and ordered a lock-picking kit on Amazon. Been carrying it with me ever since. Came in handy twice. Once, my boss got locked out of his office. Another time, a friend lost her bike keys. I've gotten a bit better, but not a lot better. I think it's a great life skill. It made me evaluate my security choices better, and it's a great conversation topic sometimes. 9 out of 10 would recommend. If you're on YouTube as much as me, you've probably seen a few lock-picking channels. I think they're always very interesting. They're a little bit frightening. While some locks are a little bit more secure than others, these channels seem to prove that no lock is 100% foolproof. It sometimes makes me wish I could have learned this skill when I was younger. Story 3. Writing. It may even happen that by diving into it, you could earn something. Writing. It takes a certain amount of conscious effort to keep prices down, though. 1. Knowing that you don't need a fancy computer to run a word processor. You don't need a Mac when a Chromebook or lower-end PC will suffice. Nowadays, a Bluetooth keyboard for your smartphone will also work. 2. Knowing that Google Docs and OpenOffice are free, and that you don't need to shell out money for MS Word or Scrivener. 3. Knowing that you do not need to pay for illustrations unless you're ready to sell to a publisher. 4. Knowing the difference between actual publishing and vanity publishing. 5. Knowing that you need neither the best keyboard nor the best chair to write. 6. Not spending money on writing-related tchotchkes. 7. Knowing that you do not need to pay for feedback. The internet will gladly give it for free. 8. Realizing that if your story is compelling enough, you don't actually need coffee. I agree with all of these except 7. Most free internet feedback is awful and unhelpful. Paid feedback is worth the cost. Knowing how to spell tchotchkes. That's a lot of stuff I would have not even considered doing. I thought more about, okay, a pen and a notebook to scribble. And these will be full, so you need more. Writing is a hobby. And that's very true that you don't need a Mac to be able to write. Almost any internet-capable device will work. I remember an interview with the person who wrote the 50 Shades of Grey books. She said she wrote those things on her phone, and she didn't use a keyboard. I believe her. Story 4. Cross-stitch, embroidery. It's fairly cheap in general, but once you have a few sets in, you have a wide variety of colors to do your own. Edit to add, whoa, thanks for the silver, my first. Came here to say this, you can make embroidery expensive if you want, but if you don't, it can be super cheap forever. I mean, DMC floss is, what, 75 cents per skein? From DMC, it's 77 cents. At Michael's and Joann in my area, it's 56 cents, but you can usually use a coupon to drop the price to 44 cents-ish. If you think you've got the passion, then embroider, fix, and fashion, for there's really nothing finer than a needlepoint designer. Take a moment, take a minute, take a spool of thread and spin it. Take a work of art to relish, make a pattern to embellish. See, I say it in confession that it's simply my obsession, for there's something pretty bitchin' about an afternoon of stitchin'. Story 5. Weightlifting. Average person would even save a ton of money by fixing their diet as a side effect. I bought my own home gym 10 years ago, paid $2,000 used. Had a few upgrades, so $2,500 altogether. I have almost all the equipment needed, minus a leg press station. Over 10 years, my gym would have cost me $20 a month. A membership here runs about $80. I'm super strong and relatively healthy. I should jump on my elliptical more. For the first 5 years, I also ate super healthy and lost a ton of weight. Eating healthy stopped me from eating out and also made my groceries inexpensive. I've been a little more lax now, tougher with my wife and kids around. Still have the gym though, and still like lifting weights. Who knows how many years I've extended my life, which I guess will cost me money though? Hell, live longer, have to pay more to live. It's a pay-to-play system. You can always take up smoking to even everything out. Story 6. Magnet fishing. All you need is a strong magnet and some rope, really, and maybe a few other things like gloves. Maybe even find something valuable one day if you're exceedingly lucky. I pulled a gun out of a local river. Explaining magnet fishing to a cop you called on yourself is an interesting conversation. At first, I read this as I pulled a gun at a local river, and I was like, damn, I shouldn't mess with this guy. I'm mostly water. Today, I learned of a new hobby. Sounds fun. It's tons of fun. 99% of the stuff you'll find is just junk. Lots of nails and fishing hooks and whatnot. But it helps keep the river clean and gives you something to do on a nice day. The typical joke is someone fishing for fish and coming up with a boot or a tire. It never occurred to me to be on the other end of that, to actually fish for something that isn't fish. I wonder if magnets can also help bring up iPhones. In a well-known enough city, you could probably make some bank finding those things. Story 7. Wildcrafting. That's pretty much the entire point. Note, wildcrafting should be practiced mindfully, with sustainability in mind. Take only what you need, leave enough for the plants and animals to live well and reproduce. Abundance is there, but only if we don't harm it. Well, now I need to know more. Basically, the skill of identifying and utilizing wild plants for things like food, medicine, and other utilities. The point is generally to use local plants and things you already have available as much as possible. You can get pretty far with some really good Googling. Joining some groups, Instagram and Facebook both have some pretty active communities, and nothing more. I picked it about 2 years ago, and I think the only thing I invested in was a pair of $10 gardening gloves. Story 8. I started a podcast as a hobby with 2 friends that moved to different countries in 2018, and we're still going strong. We talk about different topics every couple of weeks, and it's very fun. The only expense we have is the host website, but we only pay because we have uploaded many episodes and needed more cloud space. But it's still very cheap in comparison to other hobbies. If you need to save money, could you not upload to Spotify or YouTube or something similar that lets you do it for free? Podcasting can be done this way, but it's really hard to get any traction by uploading like that. If you join a network or podcast hosting site, they use a special type of web application that auto-uploads your podcast to every listening service. With a lot of those sites, your first ads are for other podcasts, which helps spread the word. Story 9. Drawing. I use a pencil, a pen, and a sketchbook. It's possible to make drawing more expensive. Better pens cost money, colored pencils cost money, digital art supplies cost money, but it's not necessary to buy those things in order to enjoy drawing. It may not be necessary, but once you get into drawing, it's almost impossible to resist buying those expensive art supplies that you're never quite good enough to use and end up just accumulating dust for years. I found digital art to be the best because once you've bought the tablet, there isn't much else you can buy to improve your art, except a better tablet. Nah, the more you get into drawing, the more expensive. You get into the nice papers, the nice pencils. It gets up there for sure, unless you just stick to a number 2 in a regular notebook. I've spent a lot of money on paper. A lot. I'm on the fence about that one. I've had notebooks before. They still have some blank pages in them. I always tell myself, fill up this book before you move on to something else. It's possible to be able to switch those to digital art. It also depends on what program you're using. And forget Adobe. I admit I am part of the problem paying the Adobe monthly rent. If you use more than one program, you have to pay the full price, and it's expensive. There are plenty of free alternatives you can use if you get into digital art. After that, you have to find a decent drawing tablet, and if you don't trust cloud services, a hard drive with a good amount of memory. Story 10. Programming. You already have a computer, tablet, 3DS, etc., and if you need a dedicated device, a Raspberry Pi 4 is less than $100. Most tools are free. Open source tools are free forever. Internet is full of tutorials and examples. YouTube has a lot of courses in any field you like. Programming for Fun has a competitive side too. I can't get into programming because I can't think of what I'd like to program. Like, what is the end product I'm making? You don't necessarily have to come up with an idea all by yourself, and the end result doesn't even have to be useful to you. There's no shame in following tutorials or building something that's already been made before. I came here to say the same. You can make hundreds of programs without paying a dime. Then you can make hundreds of programs with being paid some dimes. Story 11. Stick collecting. No joke. It sounds dumb at first, but once you get a few solid sticks, you'll start to love it. You should see my arsenal. All right, dude, you can't tease us like this. Show us your stick collection. Plot twist, original person is actually a golden retriever. Sticks or it didn't happen. Are you the kid from my summer camp years and years ago? He was the oddest kid and would spend all day collecting sticks on our various field trips. I had to haggle with bus drivers to let the kid bring all of his sticks onto the bus. I asked his mom about it once, and she said they had over 100+ sticks in their backyard. He had pretty bad anxiety, and for whatever reason, it calmed him down. He was honestly a great kid. Always wondered what happened to him. Send sticks pics. Story 12. Origami? Birdwatching? Birdwatching. $20 for a great field guide to your local birds. $100 for a starter pair of binoculars. $40 to $80 for a nice bird feeder set up at home. Then $500 for a decent spotting scope. Up to $1,000 for high-end Zeiss or Swarovski binos. $8,000 for a trip to Central America with guided forest tours. $75,000 for an RV so you can travel America chasing rarities once you retire. It really depends on your level of commitment. $10 for a bird feeder and $20 for some good enough binoculars? Living in South America is good. Someone good at budgets help. I don't know what to cut. Bird watching is fine until you want to see the majestic hoodly-hoo across the globe. Or maybe the birds are watching you. Birds work for the bourgeoisie. I think any of these hobbies can be blown out of proportion with the right mindset. Anything can be ballooned out of proportion. Maybe you don't need strong binoculars. Maybe you're happy just exploring your own personal area for birds. That kind of depends on where you live, of course.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 13. Exercising and running. You only need to buy a good pair of shoes and some workout clothes, and you'll be set for a while. I feel like everyone commenting is a marathoner or some other long-distance runner, which at that point is more enthusiast than hobby. Most people running for general fitness are probably not doing more than 20 miles a week. And if you're going out to run a few miles throughout the week and the occasional 5 or 10K, then running is cheap. You might not even buy 2 pairs of shoes a year. Beyond that, people just need to have the appropriate clothes, a stick of Body Glide, and maybe a water bottle. Story 14. I've recently returned to 3D modeling. It's a hobby with a rock-bottom price of entry. You can invest in $10 to $20 at a time. You can start with Blender, a free and powerful program that lets you do everything from modeling and sculpting to texture painting and animating. Getting the fundamentals down is free thanks to incredible tutors like Grant Abbott and Andrew Price. After that, the world is your oyster. You can either throw a few bucks towards more in-depth tutorial courses or buy add-ons that enhance your workflow. You don't have to do any of that, though, and can just let your creativity run wild. Story 15. Cycling in theory. Buy a bike and only have to pay for minor maintenance while increasing fitness levels and happiness. However, one will quickly realize that the proper number of bikes to own is N+1, where N is the current number of bikes owned. Commuter bike, touring bike, race bike, full suspension trail bike, hardtail trail bike, aggressive hardtail trail bike, freestyle jump bike, fat bike, and a BMX for laughs and giggles. I was told it's N-1, where N is the number of bikes it takes for your wife to divorce you. Who needs a wife when you have bikes? I biked quite a lot before. Not as a hobby, I just preferred that to get to work. I was able to bike to work as a very healthy form of exercise. I was fortunate to live in an area where most places were able to be biked to. Not the most friendliest for bikers, but still, not bad. Story 16. Geocaching? So easy. All you need is a few small trinkets and a geocaching resource. When I was a kid, my family loved to geocache, and eventually we set one up near our house. An office worker wrote us a long ballad about how excited he was to see a new cache and how he rushed out, found it, and signed it, and made it back in less than an hour, just in time for his meeting. It was so sweet and memorable. Geocaching is such a great hobby. I left a laminated card with a QR code that leads to a rickrolling. Story 17. Computer programming. Python is free, the modules are free, new modules keep coming out and getting better for free. Plenty of resources out there. YouTube, AutomateTheBoringStuff.com are free. A hobby that changes the way you see the world and adds another method of problem solving. It gets you exposed to all kinds of other fields. Also could land you a work-from-home job making great money or save you time on completing repetitive, boring tasks. Learning Python gets you a huge head start on learning other languages as well, but Python can be used for a whole project. It's vast. Story 18. Disc golf. It's really fun, and you can buy discs for like $10, and that's pretty much all you need. Can't believe I had to get all the way down here to find this. Disc golf cost me about $30 to $50 for the first 3 years. I just used the same discs, was gifted some. And even when I did decide to get more discs, it's incredibly reasonably priced. That and most courses have free access. Great sport. Disc golf? Don't you mean ultimate frisbee? It seems to be the butt of a lot of people's jokes. But if you don't mind it, who cares what other people think? It's your hobby, not theirs. Story 19. Meditation. One of the cheapest hobbies. But people manage to spend money on this too. Joining expensive courses, buying aesthetics like expensive candles, mats, etc., going on meditation retreats in high-end resorts and exotic locations. I can understand some well-scented candle or more comfortable mat, but why would anyone need some fancy wall ornaments or golden Buddha figurines? I thought closing your eyes is one of the most important parts. Story 20. Gardening. If anything, it becomes virtually free after a few harvests because you can take the seeds out of the vegetables you just picked and replant them. Plus, you already have free compost for the remaining plant matter / peels, etc. you picked. If you play your cards right while there's an initial investment, it'll pay for itself in the end. Haha, nope. You get addicted to buying new plants. Story 21. Pixel art. Unlike other graphic design methods where you might need expensive software like Photoshop or Illustrator, you can use MS Paint or a variety of free software. Even for animation, it's a great hobby because the pixel limit where you can place them, finite number of combinations and such, and refining techniques with color palettes, lighting, blending, etc., there is so much you can do. I'll agree with that one. There are a lot of free or really cheap programs you can get. It's one of those hobbies that reinforces the idea that limits can be more creative. It's a challenge to figure out how to express the idea you're expressing with a very limited row of pixels at your disposal. Story 22. D&D. Depending on how invested you get into it at the start, if you get all the books, you could easily spend over $100. But you can find PDFs for a lot cheaper. After that, though, you just have to find people to play with and you don't have to spend any more money. Story 23. Skateboarding. It's very cheap so far. I do recommend buying a good quality board, not something from Walmart. But I've gotten a lot out of this board, and when I break the board, instead of paying another $140 for a whole new complete, I just have to buy a new deck for $30, $65, and so on for the rest of the parts. Story 24. Stay away from Warhammer 40K. You'll start with, oh, once I have my area set up and my paints, it's not so bad. Then one day you'll look at your army and realize that while Raven Guard is great, you really want to try an Elder army. Eventually, you'll feel like you went through the warp without a Geller field. This is so true. A lot of gamer hobbies can very much be a rabbit hole of paying money. Collectible card games are another one. Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, all the variants, Yu-Gi-Oh! Even for a while there were pre-painted figurine games like HeroClix. Story 25. Chess. Easy to learn, difficult to master. Resources to learn are freely available on the internet, and it's gaining quite a bit of popularity on streaming websites over the last few months. The PogChamps tournament brought me back to chess. Hikaru guide us. I tend to be guided by Charlie, the second coming of Jesus himself. Story 26. Smithing. It's always just as expensive. And nothing beats the feeling you get when you finish your first knife and cut something with it. Learning to mirror sharpen a knife on whetstones like the ancient Japanese masters? $300. Getting your hand stitched shut after touching the blade and losing a pint of blood? Priceless. Story 27. Writing. All you need is a Word document and your brain. Unless you're like me, who prefers in real-life writing, and now has a dragon's hoard of journals to write in. I hoard a bunch of empty notebooks. I'm so scared to write in those pretty empty pages and mess up. Story 28. Collecting buckets. I have 7 buckets. The 4th one is also dark blue. That really depends on how long your bucket list is. I think I'd rather get rickrolled than read that again. What color is the 6th one? It's dark blue too, just not as good. Dovahkiin? Story 29. Optimizing your personal finances. Ah yes, my favorite hobby. Tied for first with my actual for-real job, doing dishes and cleaning my bathroom. I love saving money. I managed to save 5% of my car insurance by threatening my agent with a golf club. Story 30. Reading. Having fun isn't hard when you got a library card. I did not expect to see an Arthur reference on here today. I thought of that, but I developed a habit of wanting to buy every book I read, so libraries gave me anxiety. Story 31. Game development. Unity is free. Visual Studio is free. Blender is free. Aseprite is $20, but also not necessary, but highly recommended. It's a really fun hobby that doesn't have to cost anything if you don't want it to. Only your sanity. Story 32. Regardless of your hobby, the cost of investment is proportional to your self-control. The more self-control you have, the cheaper the hobby is. My hobby is getting addicted to new hobbies, spending loads of money on it, then losing interest. Story 33. Bodyweight fitness, barefoot running, yoga, but obviously you can let costs accelerate. If you have to go to Mexico to run with Tara Humara or go to expensive yoga classes, locally or in India. Story 34. Walking around outside and picking up shiny stuff you find on the floor, sometimes known as goblining or magpieing. Story 35. Reading books from the library, card tricks, shadow puppetry, pressing flowers, singing, stargazing. Story 36. Reading. Library is free, and there are always cheap books at garage sales, thrift shops, etc. Story 37. Hiking. I love getting lost in outdoor spaces. It inspires my creative work and is generally free. Story 38. Playing cards. As long as those aren't Magic the Gathering cards. Cardboard crack, if you play your cards right. Story 39. Searches through comments to find a new hobby. Story 40. Extreme couponing. Mom? Story 41. Collecting rocks that you find. Story 42. Love languages? Story 43. Dumpster diving. Story 44. Daydreaming. Story 45. Swimming.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.